In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, two brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, John Flack and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears.
Hello and welcome to the Retro Movie Roundtable. I'm your host, Russell Guest, and today, joining me, my good friend and co-host, John Flack. John, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am pumped. I'm so pumped because I think this is going to be the best show we've done yet. I say that every episode, but I really mean it this time. Because today, we've got my wonderful wife, Mary, joining us on the podcast. Mary, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on this podcast. I'm excited about getting into this movie with you guys.
Let's get to know our guest here a little bit. I know her pretty well, but for those who don't, Mary, we're doing a superhero movie today. Who's your favorite superhero?
My favorite superhero, I think I'm going to have to go with Spider-Man. He was my favorite as a kid. I always had to watch Spider-Man cartoon on Saturday morning. So I think that he's consistently over the years been my favorite.
Okay. And so we're doing a Tim Burton movie. Do you have a favorite Tim Burton movie?
Oh, that's a hard one. I'm a huge fan of Tim Burton. I would probably have to go with Edward Scissorhands. I'm going to go with that. And it's also
Is it because of the shrubbery?
Big fan of the shrubbery and the haircuts. It's a Tim Burton and it's also a Danny Elfman score, so that's a winning combination for me.
Well, we've got another winning combination then here. So one more here. What was the most excited you came out of a movie theater? Like probably at a young age. What did you come out of the theater most excited about?
Probably depends on what you define as young age. I would say probably the most excited I've ever been at a movie was when I actually got to see the re-release of Star Wars: A New Hope. That was a packed movie theater. It was standing room only, and it was absolutely magical. I was in middle school, I think, when that was re-released, 12, 13 years old, and I would say that that's probably my best movie theater moment.
Great.
Can I ask real quick, did you think the CGI added to it took anything away from that?
I do think that it didn't need it. It was perfect the first time, and I kind of on the school of thought that there was no reason to go back and retouch it. But
it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah, but to actually have the experience of getting to see those movies in the theater, I'm glad that they did that.
So you're saying we don't need to go back and CGI in other great movies like in The Wizard of Oz, like there weren't enough Munchkins, so maybe we get some more of them and, like CGI more Munchkins.
Some more flying monkeys into the movie. I think that definitely is not something that needed to be done.
Okay.
I agree.
No extra Munchkins for you then.
Not a fan of that.
So, have you seen any movies lately?
Recently saw two movies. We, I guess, just recorded The Three Amigos on the DVR. I hadn't ever actually seen that movie. Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Chevy Chase. That is a really weird movie, but it's a whole lot of fun. So I do recommend it. We also redboxed the latest Jurassic Park movie, Jurassic World.
Fallen Kingdom.
Fallen Kingdom. John says,
We'll table this for later, but I did not hate it like John did. John did not care for this movie.
hate it. It just.
Our household maybe was a bigger fan of it than you, John. It had Chris Pratt and it had Bryce Dallas Howard, so I think that was a winning combination.
They did great.
In our house.
They did great. I'll give them that.
That's true. Beautiful people help.
You say Chris Pratt, and I'm in.
So, all right. Today we're gonna do Batman Returns. It's 1992 Tim Burton movie. Opening weekend, it grossed $45.6 million, which is a record for its first 2 days in the box office at that time. It went on to gross $162.8 million. All of this is according to Box Office Mojo. It came in third on the year. The movie came in behind Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, another sequel, and it placed ahead of Lethal Weapon 3. It has an IMDb rating of 7.0, and the critics of Rotten Tomatoes give it 79%, and the audience score is actually a little bit lower at 73%. So an unusual case of a blockbuster movie having a higher critic score than audience score. So, John, give me some of your expectations coming into this one. Had you seen it before? If so, what were your thoughts coming back to it now?
I had seen it before. Interestingly enough, I didn't catch it in theaters, but it is the first VHS I was ever gifted by someone. One of my mom's friends got it for me, and I watched it. I can't tell you how many times. Absolutely loved it. I loved the first one, and that's probably why I got that as a gift. And, you know, I loved it so much as a kid. It had been a while since I'd watched it, so I was kind of nervous coming back to it that I might find some things wrong with it. So I tried to temper my expectations a little bit, but I wasn't disappointed.
So when was the last time you saw it?
The last time I saw it before this, it had been at least 15 years. I'd hate to say, which is kind of sad. I'd watched the first Tim Burton Batman quite a few times since then, but maybe since I didn't have a VCR for a long time and had no copy of it, but this gave me a wonderful excuse to buy it. And maybe those two movies after it, particularly the fourth one, maybe sullied my image of going back to look at the older Batman franchise. But I'm really glad I got to go back and watch it again.
Yeah, and yeah, Mary, what was your thought? Like, when did you first see this one, or have you seen this one before?
Well, I'm being told by my family that I actually saw this one in the theaters, and somehow I remembered the movie, but I guess didn't necessarily remember that I was in the theater for it. So that was quite some time ago, obviously. I then rewatched it with Russell sometime in college, so maybe 12 years ago or something like that. Kind of rediscovered the movie at that point in time, and really I'm very fond of this movie, so when I got to rewatch it this week, I guess I had forgotten how much I really loved it, and maybe see it with a slightly different lens now, and actually love it even more than I realized.
I'm with Mary. I definitely remember seeing it in theaters when I was 7 years old, and I loved it. I really loved the first one, and I probably hadn't seen it since we saw it together in college. Now, I have since then, oddly enough, seen pretty much every other Batman movie since then. Somehow this is the one that fell through the cracks, which is one reason why I wanted to shortlist this one and then bring it up again. I love the Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton 1989 Batman, and I don't know why it's been so long I've been away from here. The longer I got from it, the more I told myself it was messy, it had too many villains, and it didn't all come together. And when I came back to it, I was really pleasantly surprised to be like, wow, this is very, very, very good. And a lot of my criticisms weren't even accurate anymore, so it actually washed away a lot of my criticisms. I mean, I don't know. Maybe some of my post impressions of the Batman and Robin or Batman Forever were carrying over onto this. So, and I like Batman Forever. It's obviously several steps down from these first two Burton movies, but so yeah, I was very I had almost forgotten about it, so I was curious coming back to it, and I was really happy. So we'll be back after these messages.
Greetings, Gotham. It is I, Bane, here to take your ears from the corrupt, away from the oppressors of generations who have kept you from hearing about the movies you love most. We give it to you, the people. None shall interfere. Listen as you please. The show is yours. Step forward. Those who would serve through an army of movie lovers will be raised. Start by storming the gates of iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, and give the show a rating and review. Like the show on Facebook, email at Retro Movie Roundtable at yahoo.com. Movies will be watched, insights will be shared, fun will be had. Great movies will endure. The Retro Movie Roundtable will survive. This is the instrument of your liberation. Gotham, take back your podcasts.
This is the part of the show where we have to remind everybody, though, that we got to spoil these movies to have a good time and really talk about them. They're over 10 years old, so it's fair game. So if you haven't seen Batman Returns, do yourself a huge favor. Go back, watch it now, and then come back in and finish this episode. So, that being said, Mary, would you like to give us a plot outline of Batman Returns?
Sure, I will give you an outline. A lot happens in this movie, so bear with me on this. 33 years ago, Tucker and Esther Cobblepot give birth to a deformed baby boy named Oswald. Disgusted by his appearance and violent behavior, they cage the baby but ultimately throw him into the stream in the abandoned Gotham Zoo. Baby Oswald flows into a sewer where he grows up amongst the zoo penguins. Fast forward to present-day Gotham, millionaire Max Schreck unsuccessfully attempts to overcome the mayor's opposition to build a power plant for Gotham City. His timid secretary, Selina Kyle, speaks out of place and is dismissed during this meeting. Later, Schreck makes a public appearance at the lighting of the Gotham Christmas tree. The Penguin watches from the sewer. As soon as Max finishes his speech, the circus-themed Red Triangle Gang attack the masses and kidnap Schreck. Batman comes to the rescue and saves Selina Kyle in the process. The Penguin blackmails Schreck with the evidence of his crimes, with the intent of Schreck helping him to emerge and be accepted by the people of Gotham. Max reluctantly complies. Upon returning to his office, Schreck finds Selina in his classified files, and she has uncovered the plot to use the new power plant to drain Gotham of its energy and bring the city under Schreck's control. Max pushes her out of the window to eliminate her. Miraculously, Selina survives the fall and returns home and snaps as she creates the dominant persona of Catwoman. The Penguin makes his debut by staging a kidnapping and rescuing the mayor's baby. Bruce Wayne watches suspiciously on TV as the Penguin is granted access to City Hall's records in order to find his parents. Schreck pitches his power plant idea to Bruce Wayne, but Bruce sides with the mayor. Max is surprised as a more confident Selina Kyle walks in to escort him out. Bruce takes an immediate liking to her. In order to advance his power plant, Schreck asks the Penguin to discredit the current mayor and then replace him as mayor of Gotham. Batman stops Catwoman as she attempts to sabotage one of Schreck's businesses. Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle begin a romantic relationship. The Penguin and Catwoman plot against Batman. They abduct and kill Gotham's Ice Princess and frame Batman while sabotaging his Batmobile. Catwoman rejects the Penguin's romantic advances, and he attempts to kill her with a flying umbrella. The next day, the Penguin gives a speech to the Gotham people as a political candidate, but Batman overrides the audio to play incriminating lines from the Penguin that he recorded from his Batmobile. With his public image destroyed, Penguin rages into the sewer where he reveals his plan to abduct and kill all of Gotham's firstborn sons. At a charity ball, Wayne and Kyle meet and discover each other's secret identities. The Penguin appears, announces his plan, and tries to take Shrek's son Chip. He ends up taking Shrek instead. The Penguin plans to have his army of penguins bomb the city and kill thousands. Batman rushes to the scene and jams the signal controlling the Penguin army and foils the plans. Batman meets and finds the Penguin in the sewer. Shrek escapes his cage but is stopped by Catwoman. Batman pleads for Catwoman to stop. He unmasks himself in the process and offers for Selina to come home and live with him. She wants to, but turns him down because she knows she is too damaged to go back to a normal life. Shrek draws a gun, shoots Wayne, and then shoots Kyle multiple times. She survives and then electrocutes both of them. Wayne recovers to find Shrek's remains, but not Catwoman's. The Penguin emerges from the water, but promptly dies from his injuries. In the aftermath, as Alfred drives Bruce home, Wayne asks him to stop. Wayne runs into the alley hoping to find Selina, but only finds her black cat. The bat signal appears in the sky, and we see a surviving Catwoman standing in the foreground.
Wow, thank you for that. There is a lot going on in there. So I think you got it well covered. How about you, John?
Yeah. It's a complicated movie to cover in a short time.
Yeah. I think it's interesting about the story that Batman is not really central to the focus. They made a distinct decision to make this mainly about Catwoman and secondarily about the Penguin and maybe Batman secondarily. It's a smart move for a sequel movie. I don't know if you agree on that.
I do. I think it does a good job of really kind of letting the whole cast have their own story arcs, and it's a pretty clever move on Burton's part and the writing staff.
One thing I want to add is this Burton has once again veered heavily from the comic book source material. I would argue it's better. I think just a real quick, while we're on the plot now, the Penguin in the DC Comics from 1941, which was created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger, was that he was a bullied child of short stature, heavy, and just walked and had a beak-like nose. And that several stories relate that he was forced as a child to always carry an umbrella by his overprotective mother for fear that he would get pneumonia from going out like his father who died. So his only friends growing up were birds, and his love of ornithology in college led him away from people and more towards birds. And in some versions, he turns to crime after his mother dies, and the bird shop, the birds are repossessed and taken away from him to pay her debts. So, he's got nothing and he turns to crime. That's not as interesting, in my opinion, as this deformed penguin. What do you think, Mary?
Oh, that's an interesting plot line too, but I do think that the whole being raised by penguins that used to live at the zoo thing is really kind of unique, and I kind of like that story.
What about you, John? I think we have a scarier villain here from Burton than from the comics.
I think so too, and I think more than that, I kind of like that both of our so-called villains that have alternate identities, they have a bit more of a tragic arc. It's not, it's not as black and white as in the first installment, where the Joker was just already a very bad person. But both of our alternate identities villains in this one had bad things happen to them that made them this way, which is a great way to balance out Batman, because that's how he became Batman. something bad happened to him.
It also makes the villains a lot more relatable, that we can understand why they are the way they are.
Yeah.
Precisely.
And I'm going to go down that same track with Catwoman. She's from 1940 in DC Comics, again, created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. This one's a little more of a complicated history. There's more rewrites. But if you go back to the older versions, she's born in Gotham. Her mother commits suicide. Her father drinks himself to death. She runs away, lives on the streets, becoming a skilled cat burglar and later a pet store owner. So she is known at first as the Cat, and she always attracts and antagonizes Batman at the same time. So Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle have a very intertwined romance and complicated history throughout the comics. But again, I like this better. I don't know if it's because it's more updated for the 90s or whatnot, but I thought this was a lot more interesting. I liked her becoming unhinged from just being stepped on every day, and then she lashed back out. What do you think,
Yeah,
Mary?
just like...
Oh, yeah, that's something that makes the character very relatable to me.
Yeah. And John? Sorry.
Yeah, no, exactly what Mary said. It makes them more relatable. It's like you can sympathize with them a little bit as opposed to just outright dislike them.
Yeah. So, John, run us through the cast here real quick.
All right. Well, we have Michael Keaton reprising his role as Bruce Wayne / Batman. He's our caped crusader, our title character, and defender of Gotham. We have Danny DeVito as Oswald Cobblepot, also the Penguin, who is a deformed child that is raised by wolves that look like penguins to become kind of a demented character. Michelle Pfeiffer plays the lovely Selina Kyle, stepped on and taken advantage of to become Catwoman, who is more of a femme fatale, sassy, and I'd have to say sexy antithesis to Batman. And then we have the wonderful Christopher Walken playing Max Schreck, who is also the Santa Claus of Gotham, who likes energy and thinks there's never a surplus, and wants to make the Penguin into a wonderful political figure. So, sorry for my bad Christopher Walken impression, but I couldn't help myself. And we have Michael Gough as Alfred Pennyworth, the loyal butler to the Wayne family who has raised Bruce since the death of his parents, who is the only one who can kind of keep Bruce in check to maintaining his Bruce Wayne human persona. Pat Hingle also reprises his role as Commissioner James Gordon.
So grumpy.
Yeah, just a very grumpy person, but does it very well. Michael Murphy plays the mayor who, as I could tell, actually never had a name, who is trying to be ousted by Max Schreck because he opposes his energy plan. And we also have Pee Wee Herman, or Paul Rubens, playing the Penguin's father, Tucker Cobblepot, who decides to abandon his son after he realizes he might be a threat after, I think, eating their cat? So,
I think he did eat the cat.
Yeah.
Also, Tim Burton directs Pee-wee, so a little bit of a callback.
Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure.
Yeah, Tim Burton likes to work with the same people over and over again. No Helena Bonham Carter this time, but Pee-wee comes back. Ha!
Is there anyone I left out that you all feel the need to add?
Penguin, baby! Oh, no!
I actually didn't recognize him until you pointed out, John.
It was his monocle.
Oh.
I mean, right, the monocle threw me off, I guess. Okay.
And
So-
apparently, I didn't know this until then, but he apparently appeared as Penguin's father in the new show, which I've never watched, Gotham.
I had a few casting notes on this. Danny DeVito apparently was advised by Jack Nicholson to take this role, saying it's very financially lucrative to be a villain in a blockbuster movie like this. So he got a little tip from Jack, and I'm glad he took it because he was really good in this.
And there were a lot of other big names who were considered for the role.
Yeah.
And Dustin Hoffman was originally the first choice.
Yeah, and he's a great actor, but I can't imagine anybody other than DeVito. I mean, I'm going to go through a list here, but I mean, Dudley Moore, Marlon Brando, John Candy, Bob Hoskins, Ralph Waite, Dean Martin, Alan Rickman, Phil Collins, Charles Grodin, Ben Kingsley, John Goodman, Christopher Lee, Joe Pesci, Ray Liotta, Gabriel Byrne, Alex Rocco, Christopher Lloyd, Kevin Pollak, Robert Davi. Apparently all have connections to possibly being casted for this role. Now
there could have been some great ones. I'm so happy that I like Genesis, but Phil Collins playing that role, I could not have imagined that.
It's kind of hard to imagine any of them because DeVito has done this role so amazingly. It's kind of hard to imagine any of them in the role.
Phil Collins is the one I have the hardest time seeing. I could just for some reason I can just see him with an umbrella going, I can't dance, I can't sing, only thing I got my parasailing swing. I turned him into Dave Matthews there for some reason at the end, but that one just doesn't fit to me.
Yeah, I was gonna say some of the other ones I could see. I could definitely see, maybe Joe Pesci or Bob Hoskins.
I think Pesci would have been good.
Yeah, but Pesci would have been probably the top of my list. But the other ones are accomplished actors. But it's like Phil Collins. Like, what do you have to offer acting wise for a major role, not just a throw-in role?
Michelle Pfeiffer was one of the actresses actually considered to be Vicky Vale in the previous 1989 Batman movie, which was kind of fun. So she didn't win that role, but she got an even bigger role. I'd say she came out of this deal pretty good. So that was a fun fact. And there were a lot of people considered to be Catwoman as well.
Well, and she was not picked originally. She was apparently kind of devastated when she wasn't. But Annette Bening was originally cast, but she became pregnant and wasn't able to do the role.
Also, Gina Davis was offered the role and she turned it down. She had to be in A League of Her Own instead at that time. So, which that turned out pretty good for everybody as well.
Yeah. Great movie.
But I mean, there's a long list of people who are considered to be Catwoman: Brooke Shields, Sigourney Weaver, Lena Olin, Madonna, Raquel Welch, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Ellen Barkin, Cher, Bridget Fonda, Jennifer Beal, Kim Cattrall, Reba McEntire, Meg Ryan, Gina Davis, Demi Moore, Nicole Kidman. All of these got considered.
Playing in the next movie.
Yeah, Nicole Kidman, similar to Michelle Pfeiffer, kind of out of the consideration role, kind of came out okay and got to be in Batman Forever. So, again, I think they picked well here. I mean, it's just such a staggering list of people. In doing research for this, I had to wonder how many of these people were just barely mentioned at a table versus were given serious consideration. So, but apparently Dustin Hoffman and Gina Davis and a few others were more heavily considered, but I think they came out okay in the end. And then, and then another interesting choice. One last one was singer David Bowie had previously been considered to play the Joker in the 1989 Batman instead of Nicholson, which would have been interesting, but I can't imagine doing any better than Jack Nicholson in that. But he was again brought back in and considered to be Max Schreck instead of Christopher Walken. So Bowie turned down the role in favor of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me in 1992. So.
All right.
Yeah. So let's talk about the film creation here a little bit. Let's what do we think about Tim Burton in this movie? I think he has a lot to do with the success and the feel of this movie. What do we think about Tim Burton and Batman Returns, and as a director in general? John?
Yep. I think he did a fantastic job. I like the fact that he seemed so hesitant to make a sequel because, let's be honest, making a sequel, directors don't often return for it, especially if there's a lot of success with the first one. And I believe his quote was, I'll return if the sequel offers something new and exciting. Otherwise, it's a most dumbfounded idea, unquote, from what he said. And it has such a different direction than the first movie, but it has the same feel. Like, I like how he did Gotham. It's dark. It's got an almost old or archaic feel to the city. And he nails it pretty well. As I said, I like that the villains had a different type of story arc than how the Joker's was in the first one. So it's still kind of its own movie. It doesn't just follow the same outline of the first one, and I really respect that, and I can see why he decided to return after he got maybe the ideas and the script, and Bob Kane was on to be a consultant for Sam Hamm, and I just think Tim Burton nailed it. The casting is great. I can't say enough about him.
I mean, I think Tim Burton really knows how to make a great superhero movie. I think it's a shame we didn't get a trilogy out of this somehow. They gave him a ton of creative control in order to get him back, and I think it paid heavy dividends. I mean, he clearly made them a lot of money, but also I think one of the things that Tim Burton's style just does so well for Batman in particular is that he knows how to use the darkness. He knows how to find the good in the darkness, whether it be the happy, funny side of the darkness in The Nightmare Before Christmas, or whether it be to find compassion into an outcast character like Edward and Edward Scissorhands. And I think Batman is another great example that just lends himself to what Tim Burton does so well. He is he is born of darkness, and well, technically he adopted the darkness. But
Really adopted it. Born into it.
So he adopted the darkness, but he is still a man of the dark, and he uses the dark for good. And I think it's interesting that he is in this very dark universe. And again, nobody sets the scene of feeling like I'm in a comic book, and I really like this feeling that he gives by being in Tim Burton's Gotham City. Mary, did you want to expand on anything?
Sure. One of the things that I really think is characteristic of probably all the Tim Burton movies that I've seen is that when I'm watching the movie, I feel like I'm in a very different reality. I don't feel like I'm, just in a different city. I feel like I'm in a place, time, different universe altogether that's just slightly different. Architecture's slightly different, lighting's slightly different, styles are slightly different, and that's not necessarily the same from Tim Burton movie to Tim Burton movie. I would say Edward Scissorhands has the same sort of vibe where I feel like this is a different place and time that I'm travel to when I watch the film. This movie has the same effect for me, and I think that really helps to support the idea Russell mentioned where it feels like a comic book. It feels like these characters just pulled right off of the comic book page.
And I mean, I think it's important to look too where he is in his career. He is on fire. He did Pee-wee's Big Adventure, as we mentioned, at 1985. Beetlejuice, obviously, is a classic, 88. And then Batman, 1989. Edward Scissorhands, 1990. And then 1992 is where he lands. So, I mean, he is on absolute fire. And he continues that streak because he follows this up with The Nightmare Before Christmas the next year, which he's not the director, but he wrote and produced it. So he doesn't have a misstep for quite some time. When he missteps, it's painful. Planet of the Apes remake was still pretty painful. And the Willy Wonka thing I would prefer not to acknowledge. But overall, Tim Burton is one of my favorite directors. And this movie, coming back to it, reminded me of why I love Tim Burton so much.
Well, I like his diversity because in between those last two you just mentioned, but one of my favorites of his is Big Fish. Wonderful piece of storytelling and artistic in its own right. Very different direction for him, but very interesting movie. Anyone who hasn't caught it, I recommend going and seeing it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of information out there too that he was rumored, or there were talks of him doing a Superman movie, which I would normally be like, yes, sign me up for that. Post Christopher Reeve, but apparently it would have been Nicolas Cage being Superman, and I said perhaps it's best that we left that one alone.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to agree with you on that.
Yeah, but I mean, the cinematography is great. They use. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in the atmosphere as we transition into that. But with the atmosphere, a lot of this is old-fashioned movie making by today's standards. It's a lot of it's in the studio, a lot of it's models and small miniatures, a lot of it's lighting and sets, and so. The stylized way that he creates the architecture of Gotham is something that he had full control over, and it wasn't just going and shooting an older city. Like the Christopher Nolan Batman ones seem a lot more like, Chicago, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, New York, which is where these things were filmed. And what I love about it is how that, as we talk about like the feel of the movie, Gotham City here feels like something. It's not a safe city. It's not a nice city to be in, but it's something that I, as a viewer, like to be taken into and immersed in. Mary, you were talking about that a little bit earlier. What is it about Burton's Gotham that you like in terms of the feel of it and the atmosphere?
I really love how the architecture is done. The way it kind of is a brutalist architecture style, maybe a little bit of Art Deco to it, but the way the statues are created and the darkness of them, it almost feels in a certain way ancient yet modern at the same time, and that sort of combination goes together in a nice way, because that keeps the movie from being linked to a specific city or a specific time period. I feel like in fashion as well, you have sort of more vintage looking styles. You have, more vintage technology. For instance, Penguin's writing with a feather pen. But at the same time, Bruce Wayne's using CDs. So we have this meshing of new tech and sort of a vintage feel that gives it a unique quality, such that in 50 years from now, it's still going to be ambiguous as to place and time, and I think that's a strength of the movie.
I think it is good. I mean, it's with the one exception of the compact disc, this movie feels about the same as it did in 1992, and it would have felt believable that it could have come out another 20 years before it did. There was a little bit of a tip of the hat as to the men in coats and hats and stuff like that might go back to the 40s of the heyday of some of these comics and stuff like that. But, I mean, there's nothing grossly apparent anchoring it to that time either. So, like you said, it creates a wonderful world that lives onto itself, and it's aging really well because of that. John, what do you think about the atmosphere?
Well, I'd like to go back to what you mentioned a little bit about. I love his use of small-scale models, and it's almost like he took from his previous film, Beetlejuice, where you noticeably are seeing small models of things in and out of the movie. But a lot of the times, if you take a really close look, you can tell it's a small model. But honestly, as a kid, I couldn't have been able to tell the difference at all. And I think that's wonderful. And I'm glad Mary brought up the statues, because that's something I noticed as a kid and now. It actually almost has a bit of a dystopian feel to me. And it does have that kind of old but contemporary kind of feel. And I really feel like this kind of led to the development of, honestly, one of my favorite cartoons of all times, right after this, the Batman animated series, which had the very same feel. And I feel like, yeah, I feel like if Tim Burton hadn't done it this way, that show either wouldn't have been made or not made in that way. And it is still, even if you watch it to this day, the animation in it is wonderful. So I think he made Gotham this dark but also somewhat a hopeful place. It's interesting, focusing around the holidays at the time. But even like the cat statue sculpture for the Shrek stuff, it has this kind of 50s feel to it. It's but it somehow still feels modern. So I think the atmosphere that he created was just fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. And an interesting piece of note to talk about the atmosphere is, I mean, it reflects off obviously the comic books, but Gotham City, DC. One thing I love about DC comics over Marvel comics is they create their own geography and there's its own United States. And Gotham City is based on 1940s Chicago. So it's a town of mobsters. It's a town of corruption. It's not safe and it's large and so I think that again that 1940s element of what it was based on in the comics, Burton picks up on and then adds to it beautifully, and so it has a sense of darkness to it, and
Yeah, it has a sense of darkness, but also has a sense of cold. You feel like it's winter. It's Christmas season. There's snow everywhere. There's icy water. It does. I don't always notice the season in a movie, and the winter season is a big part of the way this movie feels.
yeah, and we talked. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, it's like, did they build the zoo in an Arctic place? Because it never seems warm there. How could you ever have any warm animals there? Like, where would the lions be?
Well, they completely did this movie in a studio, but as you pointed out, they did have several of the penguins are real. Some of them are puppets. Some of them are animated. But to accommodate them, they did use a refrigerated stage. So none of this stuff's on site, and that just shows you. I am not pulled out of it at any moment. None of it looks fake. In fact, a lot of it looks fantastic. The forced perspective on the buildings, where he warps the proportions of the buildings to make them look taller, or like the street has a dramatic effect by putting bright lights down the street, and then it gets dark as these buildings seemingly skew up, and it's like Batman looking down surveying his city. I really love that.
That almost gives it a very Metropolis-like feel, like the old movie Metropolis,
Yeah.
where they're using, some of these techniques for the first time, but they embrace it, and they use light and dark in a very intentional way to create a certain feeling and actually embrace the fact that they're creating all of this with models. And that actually brings me to another point I wanted to mention about the look and feel of the film is because he's using these models and artwork as backdrops. You see it in the sort of distant views of the city. You also see it at some moments where you're looking at Wayne Manor. It looks like a painting. It actually looks like a comic book frame on a page with just a tiny bit of movement. And there's a scene where Danny DeVito is in what looks like a completely still frame, like a painting, and he's the only thing moving or interacting. And there's the music, and there's Danny DeVito, and then there is a backdrop, and it really sets an artful feel to the views, and it also kind of at the same time highlights the things that Tim Burton intended to highlight.
Yeah, I wanted to point out a few set designs and just really give some big thumbs up. The snowy park where the penguin is dropped in the very beginning and the transition of him flowing through the sewers is just phenomenal. And then the sewer system where the penguin grows up and then has his base of operations, it's just absolutely fantastic. The vaulting looks architecturally impressive. The lighting up on that does set a very eerie feeling. The green waters that are around him. Again, it's comic booky, but it's just not goofy. And the mood feels serious, but also fantastic and amazing. It's a great ride. And then another one of my favorite pieces in the set design there had to do with Selina's apartment, how it was just, everything was kind of this dingy, pale pink, and it was such a good contrast when she goes under that scene where she snaps and becomes Catwoman, where she tears everything up in the apartment, starts spray painting stuff black and stuff. So I thought that was a good, you could call it like watermark. This is where her life is, and then they're going to come back to it.
I've never seen a movie, and I've loved all the Batman movies and a lot of other comic book movies, but how cartoonish he made it, particularly the villains, but also realistic and empathetic. Like, it's not over the top cartoonish. I mean, that leather suit, which apparently was hell on Michelle Pfeiffer. Just total hell. Like, it gave her a comical feel, but realistic at the same time. I didn't feel like I was in a cartoon, but I could still see the cartoonish aspect of it. And obviously, the penguin is wearing a suit. I mean, his hands are deformed. I mean, he's eating fish raw, even in front of his staff. It's walking a fine line, and he does it. Tim Burton's running a tightrope at that point, and he just does it great.
So you're right. We got to talk. We talked a lot about the physical environment, but you're right. The wardrobe on this is phenomenal. Mary, what did you think about the penguin?
DeVito's wardrobe. I'm pretty sure I remember being actually frightened of him when I was 7 or 8 years old when I saw this movie. He's, the black drool and the disproportionate costume padding, it's all very unnerving. And it with his pale skin, pointy nose, darkened eyes, it really reminded me of the Dracula character from the 1922 Nosferatu movie. It really kind of looks like I immediately, in watching it this time around, immediately thought of that character. He's got those dark eyes, sharp teeth. There's a scene where there's blood dripping from his mouth. He's got those sharp fingernails. And to just go into Google the pictures of Nosferatu, it just looks to me like some inspiration was drawn from that movie for the creation of this character.
So what was that actor's name out of coincidence?
So that was going to be in my look for this moments, but Max Schreck is the name of the actor who played Dracula in the 1922 Nosferatu. I think that's definitely no coincidence that Christopher Walken's character is actually named Max Schreck in this movie.
That's right. John, Penguin was scary. Do you have anything to add on that one? I mean, she definitely covered it for me.
Yeah, I was about to say that wraps up about everything I'd have to say about the penguin.
I thought one thing that was really interesting was that Michelle Pfeiffer said in an A&E biography that her costume had to be vacuum sealed. That she was fitted into it. And she would actually get lightheaded as she would perform in it. It really is that tight. And they would actually cut it off of her, which was quite costly because they cost
$1,000.
They cost $1,000 a suit, and she went through over 60 cat suits. So
she apparently couldn't hear herself, and so Tim Burton had to tell her to tone it down on saying lines and not screaming them because she just couldn't hear herself.
They also asked her if she had put the costume on for her husband later or not, but she said no, she did not care for the costume.
She said she never wants to see it again. I think that's what she said.
I do not blame her. One thing I really did love about the costume was that in the process of her actually creating the costume, I realized that she's taking a very typical female role domestic skill of sewing, and she's actually sewing wire into this suit, and she's really creating something that's traditionally feminine but also very intimidating at the same time. And I'm not really sure what that tool is, but she pulls some sort of tool out of her sewing kit and uses that for the claws on her costume. So I really felt like the suit and its construction was representative of her taking her previous feminine role of Selena Kyle and transforming it into the Catwoman persona.
Exactly, and I think it creates a perfect foil to Batman, who is, Bruce Wayne is very wealthy, has fancy suits, someone else to help him tailor it and fix them if need be, whereas she's just a blue-collar worker she has to put it together herself, using the skills she has. She doesn't have a bat cave and mansion and unlimited resources to create a costume. And she creates a costume that is intimidating, but also quite seductive.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael Keaton didn't have a picnic either. His suit restricts head movement a little bit, which some people like to make fun of because he has to angle his shoulders. But I'll be honest with you, I like the way Keaton positions his body. It overcomes that 100%. And again, his costume weighs over 55 pounds, so it's actually pretty heavy duty stuff. You're not going to be jumping around and fighting with this stuff. So people will sometimes give Keaton a tough time for not being in superhero shape. But I mean, to be lugging 55 extra pounds of rubber around on your body, and it looks good too when he does it. So
yeah, I think this is actually probably my favorite version of the Batman costume because it feels so much like the comic book and the animated character translated to the big screen. So I like that about it.
And then they added nipples later. It's like, why? Like
you said about the CGI extra creatures in Mos Eisley Cantina, do you feel like Joel Schumacher added a lot for you by nipples?
Oh, I mean, he added tons. I'm not going to say for me, but he added a lot.
More is more, right?
Yeah. More is more. Close up of crotch shots. I don't know what he was thinking, but neon lights. I guess it was trendy at the time, but
I don't know. Joel Schumacher's Gotham is based on like a rave party in Tokyo.
I need some techno music going on, like.
We should mention this, and we didn't talk about this in the direction as much, but part of the reason Schumacher goes that way is this movie is actually not, even though it makes a ton of money, and we all enjoyed it as kids, it was criticized. It was criticized by parents at the time as being too scary, too dark, not appropriate for children. Burton's gone too far, and I don't know if they saw the first movie or not. I mean, I personally saw the first one when I was 4, and I saw this one when I was 7, and I loved both of them and didn't have nightmares. Like, this is exactly what I wanted, and I really enjoyed it. But there is unfortunate course correction from the studio coming out of this movie, and Batman Forever works largely because you get a funny man like Jim Carrey in there, and it becomes a different kind of movie. But they steer even harder into that with Batman and Robin, and there clearly is a breaking point that is no longer... it no longer works. So.
It's just sad to say that really Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze was really the only at least kind of fun part of the movie. And that's a pretty sad statement. Like, he is at least campy enough to have fun with.
Michael Gough is still around at that point.
He is still around, and I hate that he had to wind out on that note, but that's Batman and Robin. Yeah, Jim Carrey and, Tommy Lee Jones at least helped salvage Batman Returns, but
one interesting thing, like I said, this has most of its feet in the old world, but there are also computers used in this. The penguins I mentioned earlier, some of them were made to mimic the motions of specific real lead penguins and then translate that to the animated other penguins. And then some of them are also puppets as well as, and again, there are some that are real birds in the set. And they had a hard time finding these birds that they could use for the movie. And I believe that these came from London. Yes, London. So they're British penguins, which the only thing fancier than a penguin is a British penguin. What do we think about the soundtrack? We talked a lot about the feeling and the atmosphere here. Danny Elfman, again, is a huge part of what we love about the feel of this movie, I have a feeling. Mary, I know you're an Elfman fan. Is this a win for you?
No, absolutely. I would say that Danny Elfman is my, favorite. John Williams is the only one who might top him at moments, but I think that in a movie like this, Elfman is absolutely what you want because of the fantasy-like feel that he brings to his music. I can just put on a Pandora Danny Elfman station and just listen to that all day long because there's just something so timeless about his pieces.
Have you adopted the darkness?
John, what do you think about Elfman?
Oh, I think it's fantastic, and for me, especially from the first one, like that's like the opening Batman music from the first one. That is the quintessential Batman music for me, and I think Elfman and Tim Burton. I think they just work really well together. And apparently, from what I understand, is Elfman. They were skeptical to hire him at first for the original one, but he worked very hard on this. 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and it's almost operatic, like in a lot of parts of the movie. And he's very good at capturing this dark theme, these voices and everything, but also like kind of having some lighter moments and the points that he has to. And there was a lot of strain with Burton and Elfman to create a score for the sequel, and I think that probably held to make a better soundtrack overall. And sometimes you have to butt heads a little bit to create something great. And the music, it fits so well in every part. Even at the end there in the sewers, it just captures the emotion very well.
Absolutely. These are two of my this and the first Batman movie are two of my favorite scores for movies. They're really up there for me. Again, with John Williams and Star Wars and Indiana Jones, but yeah, I love this one. Before we go on, is there anything else you want to add about the atmosphere? I think it's maybe we transition into look for this.
Yeah, I think I've said about as much about the atmosphere as I can.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of the strong suits of this movie. Mary, do you have any look for this moments?
Yeah, we talked about one of my look for this moments already with the Max Shrek thing. I wanted to also point out the sewer scene. There's a scene that connects. I didn't notice the first time, or second, or maybe even third time I watched this movie. But there's the scene where Selena Kyle actually puts the bird in her mouth, and the bird is in a cage. The penguin's actual pet bird is, and she puts it in her mouth, and I didn't think too much about that after that. But so later, the penguin actually puts Max Shrek in a bird cage that looks exactly the same but is human sized, located in the sewer. So I thought in that moment, okay, so for the penguin, Max Shrek is actually his pet. He's using him. Here is this millionaire who thought he was the one in control, and now the penguin's actually put him in a bird cage. So I thought that was a fun little moment that connected in the movie.
Yeah. I'm going to give a little more information about the penguins here. I was a little bit off when I said London, so actually the production wanted to use king penguins, but the only tame ones in captivity were in a bird sanctuary in Cotswold, England, which is out in the countryside, so they weren't from London. But the birds were flown over to the United States in a refrigerated hold of the plane, and they were given their own refrigerated trailer, their own swimming pool, a half ton of fresh ice fish each day, and they would come straight from the dock, so good quality fish. And even though the temperature outside was pretty hot at that time, they kept the studio at the 35 degrees to keep the birds nice and happy around the clock. And the birds really seemed to enjoy their experience there, following their stint in Hollywood. Most of them went on to produce eggs and, mated, and were a sure sign of contented penguins. So happy penguins.
All right. Well, I'd like to point out a couple of things. One thing I found kind of interesting in reading it is that Batman actually doesn't wear boots in the movie. He was actually wearing Air Jordans. Air Jordan 6s, connected to an upper, which gave it a boot-like feel. So maybe it's the shoes. But one other thing I kind of found interesting in reading about it, and we've already mentioned that it was kind of considered to be too dark by a lot of people, especially parents.
Those parents are wrong. It's awesome.
But interestingly enough, out of the original 4 films, it's the only one that doesn't include a reference to the murder of Bruce Wayne's parents. All the other 3 do, but not this one. And that's definitely one of the darker sides of Batman.
Yeah, that's a fun find. So How does this movie affect you? Like when you watch this, like does it remind you of any stories from your life or anything like that? Like what is this movie? How does this touch you? Mary?
Oh, this is a big one for me. I'm very sort of connected with the character of Catwoman after watching this in the last couple of weeks. The scene where she is in the conference room and she is treated so badly and disrespected so badly is actually very hard for me to watch. It is a scene that's played over so many times in my own life, as an architect in a field that's still not female dominated. It's still very, very much a male dominated field. And, actually tears came to my eyes when I was rewatching that scene because I felt like her. And so I'm very connected with where Selena Kyle's anger comes from because I feel that same, I very much relate to that and feel the same sort of thing. So that's also the character that I obviously identify with most in the movie because I literally feel what she's going through. And there's been so many times when I just felt betrayed by men in authority figures. There have been times, there's the scene when the penguin promises that the ice princess is only going to be scared, and he really does kill her instead. And Catwoman says, "I thought you were just going to scare her." And she's betrayed by the penguin in that moment because he lied to her. So I've felt that in a professional setting, obviously not with, in a life or death situation, but certainly felt that I was, just completely lied to and taken advantage of. And so I very much relate to her character. And I think this is a very relevant movie now in the Me Too era where people are starting to kind of wake up to this stuff. So I would love for this movie to be re-released, actually. To capture a new generation of young women who are gonna feel the same way about Selena Kyle and really be connected with that character, even though she takes it too far.
Are you tempted to go blow up a building? Like blow up a department store?
Like I said, she takes it too far, but I do understand where her character comes from. And when she's standing in the department store window, she has tears in her eyes, and Bruce comes by and asks her what's wrong, and she says she scares herself. That's a very real feeling for women, and in today's world, and just as it was then in the 90s when this movie was made. So I think it's just very something that any young woman would connect with.
Yeah, that's a well-constructed character for sure. John, how did this movie touch you?
Well, it's a little bit in the same way Mary was talking about. I think she hit everything, probably much more on a personal note as far as Selena Kyle and Catwoman, but really all three of our characters with alternate identities. It just shows how different people react to bad things that happen in their life. Batman had his parents taken from him, and I find it so striking, that first scene where we see him, he's just sitting in his study, just basically waiting for the bat signal. Like it's totally dominated his life at that point. Like he just doesn't really care about his life as Bruce Wayne anymore. And I wish I could say that most people would have the ability to remove themselves from the equation and realize that they have the ability to make things better and dedicate their life to it. But I think Michael Keaton does a great job just kind of sitting there brooding in that study, just waiting for that bat signal to pop up in the sky. And then, even with the penguin, I mean, being thrown in a sewer by your parents, you just can't help but, I'd imagine, be angry about that, being rejected by society. And I know he spins that to his advantage later, but that would certainly create anger and resentment in just about anybody's heart, I would think. And, a lot of these, and then Catwoman, as Mary kind of expounded upon more than I probably could. It's just so many bad things have happened to these people, and they each react in their own way. And I particularly like how it makes Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle's characters, that's probably what helps them be attracted to each other. I mean, although Batman seems to really dig the bad girls, I think he can identify with her more because he realizes something really bad's happened to her, and he knows what that feels like, and has a personal, not only attraction, but just understanding of that feeling that they've been wronged. And but then also I'd like to say the unsung hero is Alfred. I love Alfred. He's great. He's just he always has a witty remark to come back to put Bruce Wayne in his place when he needs to, and he's just always there for him. Yes, it's supposed to be cold. It's like, don't you know what you're talking about? And so I guess it affects on a lot of levels that it's important to know that a lot of people's lives, things have happened to them, and everybody reacts differently. And the more we can get to know, to understand the things that have happened to them and try to help them, the better we can really help not just them, but society around us.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna follow up the Penguin in particular. I mean, I can't imagine physically scaring people that much because just even growing up, pretty normal. I mean, I wasn't particularly popular. You know, I got picked on. You know, the masses sort of reject you, and you do develop resentment towards the rest of the world, and you care about those few people in your life like John or Mary or my family and stuff like that, but then you start to build up anger towards masses of people, and they don't necessarily deserve it. And as you grow up, you realize that the people also grow up as well, and they become kinder and stuff as time goes by. But there's a part of me that still identifies with how the Penguin being ostracized would be so angry at the world. And then simultaneously, I love Batman, who is a hero who shapes himself out of the darkness. He finds the mystery and complexity and the power of the dark. If I were a hero, I'd want to strike fear in villains, and I would, want to use the dark as well. And I think Burton adds Batman to another hero that all the outcasts, all the kids in art class, the goth kids, the freaks with the black shirts and the piercings of the world are going to take a liking to, because that's who I think Tim Burton speaks most to. I think he's well received everywhere, but those people who feel outcast just really identify with Tim and his art. And I think Batman is just like Jack Skellington or Edward from Edward Scissorhands. I think this is another one of his. This is a hero for those who are pushed outside. So
yeah, and although it wasn't this movie, it was the first Batman movie. I think you can really tell that it's like Bruce Wayne is never going to have a happy or normal life. And the one scene I remember from that first movie is just when Vicky Vale wakes up and sees him, and he's literally just hanging upside down because it's what makes him feel comfortable. Like, I don't know what human would like to do that, but that's clearly a sign that he doesn't have that human side of him anymore.
It's my favorite time. How about some superlatives? You guys ready?
Oh, yeah.
All right. First one, the MVP. Mary, who's your MVP?
Well, I have to preface this with Michael Keaton being my MVP of all Batmans, because he's definitely my favorite Batman, but I'm gonna have to give my MVP to Michelle Pfeiffer in this case. I feel that this is really her movie, and she really shines in it, even though she's technically a villain character. I feel like she is in many ways the protagonist, in even though and Batman allows her to really kind of take the spotlight here.
It's a good pick, John. MVP.
This is possibly the toughest MVP I've had to pick yet, but I have to go with Michael Keaton. I think he illustrates that brooding part of him so much, but honestly, the scene where he's confronting Max Schreck with his report and everything, just the way he acts and even stands up to him. And Christopher Walken is taller than him, everything. But when he throws his report totally across the room, perfectly at him, just he can play Bruce Wayne and Batman so well. I don't know, maybe it's his close to Pittsburgh upbringing, but he's got some no nonsense about him that I just don't think you can repeat. And his subtle facial expressions are just so good. Even in that, when Selena Kyle comes back in and Max Schreck is surprised to see him, you see like an awkward smile from Michael Keaton, but it's not over the top, but just enough.
No, I'm with Mary as well, and I mean, I really love Michael Keaton. He's my favorite Batman, and that's no knock on Christian Bale because he's good too. But this was my favorite Batman. Like John, I had a hard time with my MVP. I gave strong consideration to Tim Burton. It was very hard to make this choice, but I ended up giving it to Danny DeVito because his portrayal of the Penguin is actually very scary. He truly transformed himself. Some of it's the makeup, but I mean, the way he chooses to like drool on himself with that black drool and the snarls that he makes, and he is just creepy. He is absolutely very, very scary, and just a true transformation there. So
that scene where he bites his little image consultant's nose, the laughs he's making, like the fake laughs, are great. And apparently he didn't really need any direction with most of his stuff, but he would have been my number 2 pick. I'm glad you brought him up. He was wonderful.
Yep.
I gotta give props to him for eating that raw fish. I hope it was sushi grade.
But there were 5 people I could have easily picked for MVP on this. Like,
it's a sign of a good production, and that's what this is.
Exactly.
Best supporting actor, Mary.
Because I went with Michelle Pfeiffer for my MVP, I've got to give supporting actor to Danny DeVito for all the same reasons we just talked about.
Okay, John, best supporting actor.
Well, I had to go a little bit off the track. I kind of wanted to do that, but I got to go with Michael Gough as Alfred. He modeled it apparently after a butler he knew in real life when he was younger, and to me, I loved Michael Caine as Alfred. I like Jeremy Irons as the current Alfred too, but Michael Gough will kind of always be my Alfred.
Yeah, he kind of set the standard, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
I'm gonna double what John said. Is it Goo or Go?
I say Go, but maybe it's Goo. Maybe we should say both, just in case.
I'm gonna stick with Goo for now. If you like to side with Russell and Michael Goo, let me know. If you want to side with John and Michael
we
Go.
can make a poll what you'd all prefer if you'd like.
Yeah, reach out to us and let us know on Facebook whether you're a Goo guy or a Go guy. So hidden gem, Mary.
Well, there was a character actor in here that I've quite loved for a while, so I'm going to pick Vincent Schiavelli. He plays the organ grinder. He is the one of the creepy henchmen of the Penguin. I love this character. He played Lanny in the Humbug episode of The X-Files in 1995. That's probably where I first saw him.
That's the Fiji mermaid.
The
Humbug
Fiji,
doesn't remind me
Fiji
of,
mermaid episode. It's definitely a fan favorite. He's also in Tomorrow Never Dies, but probably what most people know him from is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He's just a great actor in everything I've seen him in.
He's distinct looking. He's got very dark and set eyes. Like,
Right, and he just definitely has this ability to, be just a slightly bit lovable while being unhinged, and I think he's just a great character actor.
John? Hidden gem.
Well, actually, I have to go same as Mary on this. And actually, it was a different movie I kind of originally remember him from. He played Mr. Vargas in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which is a pretty funny role for him. But also, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But as far as character actors go, he's one of those people. He'll be in a movie, you don't know his name, but you can recognize him. And Ebert even said that he had a way of slipping into films without people knowing his name, but they remember his performance.
Right, and his IMDb is quite long. He has been in a lot of memorable roles.
Yeah.
So I'm with Mary completely on that one.
Yeah, for my hidden gem, I'm actually going to go with Jan Hooks and Stephen Whitting. They are the image consultants that they bring in. They are just so phony and lay it on so thick. I actually quite like them. I'm a big SNL fan, so Jan Hooks was on SNL, and what for me is the peak era in the late 80s and early 90s. Stephen Whitting, I'm not as familiar with him, but he just nails it by just being like, he really, when the penguin bites his nose, he kind of deserves it. So could be worse. My nose could be gushing with blood.
I think
The faces he's making while he's saying that is great. But
what do you mean by? Oh!
Tim Burton's always great at working in these sort of really obnoxious little side characters, and I think that they kind of there's characters like them in other Tim Burton movies, and they nailed it here.
Definitely.
And she was also in Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure. If I recall, she was the host of the Alamo tour, and she was just wonderfully over the top in that as well.
Yeah, Tim Burton goes back to good people again. He likes to come back to people who've treated him well. Recast. If you had to recast somebody in this movie, who would it be? Mary.
Well, that's always a hard thing to do, but I went with Pat Hingle, who played Commissioner Gordon. I've always really liked the character of Commissioner Gordon, especially in the cartoon version, but also really love Gary Oldman's version in the newer movies. I would say that if I had to put someone in his place, I'd like to see what Peter Boyle might have done with the Commissioner Gordon character in this type of film. I think he could have carried off both the sort of grumpy kind of vibe, but also brought a lightheartedness and it's sort of the right tone that might work well in a Tim Burton movie. So if I had to pick somebody, I might go with him.
Okay. I might have more on that here in a minute, but John, recast.
Well, this one's interesting, and it might sound like a tiny bit of a cop-out, but it's in the research I kind of found. Though I thought Paul Rubens did a fine job as the father, they apparently originally wanted Burgess Meredith, who played the penguin in the old 60s TV series, to play the father. But unfortunately, he had health problems, and which led to his death in 1997. But that would have been the only thing. After reading that and seeing that, Paul Rubens, as I said, I think did a fine job. But it would have been really wonderful to see Burgess Meredith in there.
Yeah. I'm with Mary. Pat Hingle and Commissioner Gordon is the one that I'm going to recast. I don't know why. I might have gone a little bit darker than she did. So instead of Peter Boyle, I would go with Gary Sinise.
Okay.
Well, I'd go a little bit younger and get him. I don't know. I could see him doing. I'm tough, but he's a good guy who's anchored in this, but in a very corrupt system and stuff like that. And perhaps I'm transitioning what the animated character from the animated series or from the Christian Bale series is. But I did not like the de-emphasis of that character in Burton's movies. It's one of the very few criticisms I have. So, best shot, Mary.
It was really hard to pick a best shot. I went back and forth several times, but it ultimately went with the scene where Cobblepot's baby carriage is floating down the sewer. It's so artful. It creates this opportunity for transition, almost as though we're traveling into this comic book fairy tale that Tim Burton has created, and you're on this path down that sewer with the baby carriage. The eerie blue light really sets up this fantasy, this cold fantasy feeling in that scene. It was really hard to pick. I had a number of other things picked out that I might use, but that's going to be my pick.
John, best shot of the movie.
I have to go with toward the end of the movie. I don't know. I don't know why I found this kind of touching, really, but when the penguin finally succumbs to his death, when the six penguins carry him almost pallbearer style to the water, I kind of found it touching, and I thought it was a wonderfully shot scene with penguins. It made me actually feel kind of sad for him at the moment, even though he was the villain doing despicable things at the time.
My top shot's going to be the moment where Catwoman goes out the window and the pink neon lights from her room are busted out, and she's the sky's full of really, really blues and blacks, and she's framed in this long shot of this black silhouette coming out of this very pink glowy room. So that's my favorite shot. A very pretty movie though, so there's a lot of good choices. And
Yes.
Mary's choice was very close to mine. I'm glad she brought that up. I could talk about both now. So, best scene.
Actually, your best shot moment is part of my best scene. I think that the whole scene where Selena is trashing her apartment and destroying everything that represents that fake persona that was Selena Kyle in the very pink, very girly apartment. She's spray painting t-shirts that have cute kittens on them and putting stuffed animals down the disposal. She's really transitioning into this more true version of herself that is Catwoman, and it just sort of ends in that moment with the words, the light that used to say hello there, and she's broken the O and the T, and now it says hell here. And that's really how it's been for her this whole time. She's just really saying it for the first time.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop in there because that's mine too. She nailed it, and I think it's a really well set up scene because they show her coming in, and shows you how sad her life is. That she's alone. She doesn't have a real boyfriend. Her mother is very hard on her. She doesn't have a very nice apartment. She comes home. She doesn't feel good about herself. Her only friend is her cat, and so all of this is set up so well. Just in a few scenes prior to this, and then it's contrasted. She comes in and she's disheveled. She's trying to find her normal. She's trying to go to the answering machine. She's trying to regain what was going on after she was nearly murdered by Christopher Walken, who's, yeah, I can push you out a window. And so it's a great scene. I remember that of the scary things in this movie. I remember seeing her as a kid. I was like, man, she's losing it. Like, she was a normal lady, but I don't think I feel safe around her anymore.
I was scared by the penguin. He was scared by Catwoman.
I mean, the penguin was scary too, but it's just like you went from this, approachable, nice woman, and then there's like, it was transforming in front of you, and I mean, she's got the tears coming out of her eyes. I mean, she's shaky. I mean, she nails it. I mean, this is why all those other Catwomen that they considered getting were. I'm glad they went with Michelle Pfeiffer. This is probably my favorite Michelle Pfeiffer role, by the way. So, and this
I agree on that.
And this scene has a lot to do with it. So, John, I stole your thunder. Best scene.
I have to go back to what I kind of touched on before. It's actually the scene that begins where Bruce Wayne is showing Shrek the report and talking to him about the energy issues. And I like how it leads into they're kind of getting into each other's faces. And I said I liked that Bruce Wayne was shorter than Christopher Walken and wasn't afraid of him at all. And I do like that the pinstripe suit that Shrek was wearing did have that Chicago mobsters feel. But then when Selena Kyle walks in and looks disheveled, I think all three of them just had such wonderful, subtle acting moments in that scene particular, where she walks in all disheveled and Max is shocked that she's alive. Bruce is seemingly a little turned on.
Yeah, he's infatuated with her.
Yeah, he just has... Michael Keaton, just his little subtle smile, like, it's just enough to notice that he's doing it to get Bruce Wayne out of his like kind of calm, cold demeanor. And Michelle Pfeiffer's doing a great job, kind of as you mentioned. This is my favorite role at first, but all three of them in that scene, I think, they both had wonderful subtleties in their facial movements and voices. Just a wonderful scene. Maybe not as important plot wise, but the acting there was very commendable.
Best quote. Mary.
Well, again, this is a very hard one because there were a lot of very quotable moments. I went with this thing that says how Batman pushes down Catwoman and she says, "How could you? I'm a woman." He says, "Oh, I'm sorry." Then she throws Batman off the roof and says, "As I was saying, I'm a woman and can't be taken for granted. Life's a blank. Now so am I." And that's just, I think, iconic of the whole transformation of the character and the movie in general.
Yeah. John, you can say it in the quote, by the way. if it's isolated.
I thought you would cut me out if I.
No. It's family friendly, but if you keep it, you get one, and I mean, it was in the movie. It literally is the quote. So I mean, we let one or two slide. So that would have been okay. So,
Okay. I'll know for next time.
Yeah, John.
Well, this one's kind of an exchange, and it's where the penguin's in the sewer with Shrek, and he said, a lot of tape and a little patience make all the difference.
That was a
By
good
the
line.
way, how's Fred Adkins, your old partner? And Fred's actually, I believe, he's on extended vacation. He's like, he's good. Like, good? And then he pulls out the severed hand, and he goes, "Hiya, Max. Remember me? I'm Fred's hand. You want to grade any other of any other body parts? Remember, Max? You flush it, I flaunt it." And it's kind of a reminder. It's like, be careful what you throw away. Like,
I almost went with that, John. So I'm glad you brought that up.
yeah.
So and this is just Walken being Walken, but this just really stuck with me. So later in the movie, Batman pulls his mask off to reveal himself to Catwoman to try and make her stop what she's doing, and Walken goes, "Bruce Wayne, why are you dressed like Batman?" and then like Catwoman looks over, "Because he is Batman, you idiot." Fair enough.
That's good.
I'm gonna shoot you both now. Bang! Wow.
I'd like to bring up one more quote if I could, Russ. I think it's really key here. At the very end of the movie, when Alfred's taking Bruce home after this adventure, and Bruce says, "Merry Christmas, Alfred," and goodwill toward men, and pauses, and he says, "and women." And that's when the credits roll. I think that also kind of sums up the theme of the movie here and the importance of the Catwoman character in this whole story.
Yeah. It's time to rate the movie. Mary, do you want to go with on a scale of 1 to 5, or sorry, 5-star scale? What would you rate this movie? Does it hold up?
It holds up extremely well, especially in today's political climate. And I actually went ahead and gave this a 5-star. I've watched it 2 times this week, and I feel like this has definitely really gone much higher up there on my favorite movies of all time list. And yeah, maybe there's a couple of things like the fact that you can't use a CD like it's a record and do a disc jockey like Bruce Wayne was doing. But other than that, I can't find a whole lot that I would change about this movie. So I'm going to give it a 5.
That's very merited for sure. John.
It sound like I'm stealing, but especially considering this is a sequel, which it's so hard to live up to an original that was a good movie, which the first Batman movie by Tim Burton was a fantastic movie, but I have to go with a 5 on this. The casting was superb, the music superb. There's nothing about the movie really that I could really correct, and I even kind of illustrated in that the only recasting I could think of is something that they wanted to do but couldn't. I just think it was just about perfect as it is.
That's interesting. I went 4.5, which I had in my head coming into this 4 before I watched it, and I raised it up to 4.5. The only thing that keeps me from going all the way to 5 on this is that I feel like Walken's character, perhaps because he's cast as such a big actor in the role, does cloud things a little bit. He's important to make the plot move along, but things are so strong with the Penguin, Catwoman, and Bruce Wayne that I don't necessarily feel as much of a tight construction resolution and what his role is and things. And so and I honestly I enjoy Walken. I have fun at times. It's unintentionally funny, as I just mentioned, but so I feel like there could have been a little tightening up there, but I nearly went 5 And to show you how much I did like it, I went back and reevaluated my top 50 superheroes movie. Maybe someday it'll be 100, but it's a top 50, and I have Batman Returns at my number 4. So it's my number 4 superhero movie.
Can I ask where Batman with Jack Nicholson is?
It's number 1.
All right. Good man.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's 2 Spider-Man movies sandwich those 2 movies. So
mine's Catwoman with Halle Berry, by the way, number 1. So
okay. There had to be one person out there who felt that way. I figured it was Halle Berry, but turns out it was you.
I've actually never seen it, but I just thought would be fun.
I have.
Oh,
We're not that
I'm
kind of
sorry.
show where we go through and lampoon a whole movie, but it would make a heck of an episode for somebody who does do that. So, let's talk about what we're gonna do next time, John. Do you have a few choices for us?
I do, and being the month of October, we are going to look at some scary movies. So, I want a little classic on this. We have the original Halloween from 1978. 15 years after murdering his sister on Halloween night 1963, Michael Myers escapes from a mental hospital and returns to the small town of Haddonfield to kill again. We also have the 1980 movie The Shining. A family heads to an isolated hotel for the winter where an evil spiritual presence influences the father into violence, while his psychic son sees horrific forebodings from the past and the future. And finally, we have 1982, the movie Poltergeist. And a family's home is haunted by a host of ghosts, and the daughter is abducted by seemingly a television.
You've picked some really good ones here. Those are good ones, aren't they, Mary?
Yeah, that's a hard pick.
Man.
Nice thing is you can't go wrong.
You really can't. And I'm going to go... I've seen all of these already, so I'm going to probably go with Halloween, the John Carpenter Halloween movie. I really love that one, so it'd be a fun one to return to. Let's go back to Haddonfield.
All right, Haddonfield it is.
All right. Well, once again, thank you so much to Mary for joining us. We hope you had fun.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for all of you for listening. If you want to reach out to us, give us a like on Facebook. Please, please, please review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. That helps grow the audience and gets the podcast exposure. And then if you want to write to us and have any suggestions, reach us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. As always, thanks for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. John?
Yeah, thank you all, and I can't help myself, but gotta go with have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight?